Alrighty. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our first Talking About Israel session for 2020. Tonight's session is entitled The Land That I Will Show You, and it will be an introductory session, a snapshot of the context, the geography, the demography, and the why of talking about Israel. Tonight's discussion will be presented by Eldad Shoham. Eldad is the Informal Education Coordinator at JNF Australia. Before that, he was a qualified physical education teacher, a water polo coach, and a member of the Israeli national water polo team. As always, nothing that we do here at Zionism Victoria would be possible without the generosity of our supporters. So a big thank you to them. And with that all said, I think we're ready to get underway. So I'm going to hand it off to Eldad to begin our first session of Talking About Israel. Eldad, take it away.
Thank you, Joseph. So hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Eldad Shoham, and I was born in Israel, in Kibbutz Ramat Yochanan. It's in the Haifa area in the north part of Israel. And here I'm working for the JNF, the Jewish National Fund in Melbourne, Victoria. Basically, what I'm doing here or at JNF, we are trying to maintain and strengthen the connection between the Jewish here in Australia to the state of Israel. So I'm going around the schools, youth movement, and communities, and just talk about Israel, show them the beautiful sides of Israel, and trying to expose them for as much as I can and share my knowledge with them for Israel. JNF Australia, we are following the David Ben-Gurion dream, make the desert bloom. We are trying to encourage and support the communities in the Israeli desert by educational and environment projects to help them to live in the desert in those extreme conditions. Now, I want to tell you a story, share with you a story of me. When I finished the army in 2012, and like most of the Israelis just started to travel around the world, I met a group of European European. When they asked me, "Where are you from?" I said, "I'm from Israel." They asked me, "Oh, really? Are you from Israel?" And I said, "Yes, of course. Why? Why are you asking that?" They said, "Because we never thought an Israeli guy would look like us." And I asked them, "What do you mean by look like us?" And they said, "We don't know, normal." So this is what led me for today's session talking about Israel. Most of the people around the world don't know much about Israel, or they don't know anything about Israel. They only know what the media is broadcast or what they tell on news. And so I'm here to share with you a bit of my knowledge and help you to be an Israeli ambassadors and talk about Israel in front any man or woman that you will meet around the world. So let's check what can be so interesting in such a tiny country. Israel is approximately 500 kilometers long and around 120 kilometers wide. 60% of the Israel is desert, and less than 10% of the population live in the desert. Like most of them just live in the big cities. And now Israel receiving such a huge media coverage. And why is that? It can be three factors. The first one is the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It's give us many news events. The second one, there are many reporters from a foreign media companies in Israel. Israel allowed this, give to many people to come to Israel. And the third one is the historical and religious importance of the place of Israel. Now, just to comparison, Israel can fit approximately 370 times in Australia. That means Israel is tiny, and like I said, get a lot of media coverage. Let's talk a bit about the history. At 29th of October 1948, the United Nations General Assembly voted on the partition plan. Okay, it's adopted by 33 votes to 13 with 10 abstentions. The Arabs didn't accept the plan and the violence collusions increased. And of course, the collusion started way before, during the Balfour Declaration, when Lord Balfour said that the Jewish people can build home for the Jewish people in Israel. But this plan was the last straw, and the violence began. 14th of May 1948, David Ben-Gurion, the first Prime Minister of Israel, declared Israel independence. The day after started the 5 Arab invasions to Israel. After 1 year, approximately 1 year, the Jews in Israel started to defeat the 5 countries and basically took control on many areas of Israel, and the size of Israel is increased. During the Independence War, the Jewish lost around 1% of the Jewish population. Now, another war that I want to talk with you is the 6 Days War, and why it's so important, the 6 Day War. So on 5th of June 1967, Israel started an attack after the Egyptian President Nasser threat about Israel non-stop. He said, we need to destroy Israel, we need to send all the Israeli to the sea, and we need to attack them right now. So at the 5th of June, the Syrian and the Egyptian army started, the Israeli army started an attack against Egypt and Syria. The Jordanian also joined the army after Israel opened with the attack. After 6 days, it's an incredible achievement. After only 6 days, Israel defeated the 3 countries, and the ceasefire agreements with all the countries. Basically, this is what shaped Israeli borders this day. Israel took control on Sinai, in the Golan Heights. We took control from the Syrian, and took control from the Jordanian on Judah and Samaria, and reunite Jerusalem. It was a big achievement to Israel, and Israel was so happy and great. Now, I want to talk with you on a few other shaping events in the Israel's history. Another terrible war that we have in Israel is the Yom Kippur War. Israel was attacked by the Syrian and the Egyptian army during Yom Kippur. It's the holiest day of the Israeli. The Israel was unready, not prepared to this war, and was totally surprised. There were 2 peace agreement treaties with the Jordanian and the Egyptian, and basically the peace treaty with Egypt, Israel need to evacuate all the Jewish settlements from Sinai, and the Israeli Jordanian just signed on collaborate agreement in agriculture and security, and use the water in the Jordanian River. In 1995, Israel signed on the Oslo Accord with the Palestinians, what could be a lead for the assassination of Yitzhak Rabin on November 95. And then in 2005, the disagreement plan, when Israel just evacuated all the Jewish settlements and took out the army from Gaza Strip. Now, here you can see the change of the demography in Israel. As you can see, in 1948, the demography changed and the Jewish population increased. What can lead for this is they declared about, when Ben-Gurion declared about Israel, it's opened the gate for Aliyah waves. A lot of Jews came from Europe and the Arab countries, and because they had Jewish states to be in, so they just came to Israel. The other thing that led for the change in the demography, it's the law of return, Chok HaShvut. And law of return says that every Jew around the world who want to come and live in Israel can do it, and then he can get an Israeli citizenship. Here you can see how the Israeli demography looks today. It's split with Jewish majority, Arabs, and other minorities that live in Israel. Now, let's talk a little bit about criticism of Israel. The 3Ds test. So the test is to distinguish between legitimate criticism to anti-Semitism. So the first D is demonization. It means that the people are trying to demonize Israel as if they the evil people, the evil guy in the world. The second D is the legitimization. People cannot accept Israel as a legitimate state. And the third D is the double standard. It means to criticize Israel for its acts, but not criticize other countries with similar circumstances. So if 3 of these are happening, so that means the criticism is from anti-Semitism. Just to show you an example, at the United Nations General Assembly on 2012, there were 26 resolutions passed against specific countries. 22 of those resolutions, it's 85%, were against Israel. Okay, that means maybe it was too much, maybe it was not legitimate, who knows. Now, there are so many non-governmental organizations that involve in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, criticizing Israel for many reasons. As I said at the beginning, Israel is making a lot of news events. This is a list of human rights and non-government organizations that you can see. A lot of them are established in the last few years. Now, one of the main players of the criticism of Israel is the BDS movement. The BDS is boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement against Israel. The BDS doesn't recognize Israel's right to exist. They criticize Israel and they open big boycotts against Israel, and they blame Israel in so many aspects. I want to tell you another story that what happened and what led their BDS boycott. So this factory was located in Ma'ale Adumim. Ma'ale Adumim, it's a place across the Green Line. In 2004, a human rights activist started a boycott campaign against this place. This place employed approximately 900 Palestinians and was a unique environment of peace and coexist between Jews and Palestinians. Also, this place paid way above average to the Palestinian people. Now, as the result of the boycott, the management of this place needed to relocate the factory to the Israeli desert and need to hire new employees. This place is Sodastream. If you remember, there was a huge campaign against Sodastream the BDS started. Now, I think one of the things that led to this boycott is the criticism without a proper knowledge or without knowing all the facts. When you do a boycott without learning all the facts, it can lead for a consequences. So that's what happened to the employees at Sodastream, in Sodastream. Now, it's really easy to, I said at the beginning, there are many foreign journalists from different media companies. Now, I want you to think about something. This is really easy to come and land in Ben Gurion, take taxi or the public transport to Jerusalem, go and sleep in the nice hotel room, okay, wake up in the morning after, go and to shout and blame somewhere in the east of Jerusalem, and then come back to your hotel, maybe go at the night, drink a beer, and the day after you're going back to your country. So when we see so many when people criticize Israel in so many aspects, we need to remember, or they need to remember, that we allow people to come in Israel. It's if you wanted to go and shout against human rights in Syria, China, North Korea, I don't think you would be able to do this. So when people criticize Israel, they need to think what led them to come in here. This is a statement from the last year from Scott Morrison, the Prime Minister of Australia, when he called the United Nations General Assembly is now a place where Israel is bullied, and all the resolutions came from anti-Semitism. Now, when we think why else do we need to talk about Israel, we can think about so many aspects. The aspects in Israel, we have a lot of innovation. Israel all the time think how we can progress, how we can we invent new innovations, how we can help to other people. By the way, I don't know if you know, Israel, it's always, every disaster around the world, Israel send people to help. If it's earthquake in Nepal or in earthquake in Haiti. So Israel always the first to support the communities around the world. IT company in Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv is second only to the Silicon Valley with IT companies. Yeah, that's good. That's right. So Israel all the time. We invented so many important things to the world, like the waves, or the USB, or water desalination to keep the water and help to support with the water problem. All this is part Israel invented. The agriculture in Israel. Yes, in Israel, as I said at the beginning, we are trying to make the desert bloom. Many communities and many new species of plants were designed in Israel to be good for the desert, to help and prevent from the desertination that happened around the world. And of course, Israel is democracy. Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East. Things are there are elections every 4 years, and the citizens decided who will be the prime minister in Israel. Now, I would like to talk with you about, show you two photos of Israel, and to show you the way that Israel doing during the last 72 years. So this is how Tel Aviv looks at the 30s. You can see there's a lot of sand, not many buildings. It was a small town. And now, after like 2 weeks ago, we celebrated, like I said, 72 years. And Israel did a tremendous progress during this short period of time. And today's Tel Aviv looks like this. I'm not sure if there is any other country or nation around the world that did such a huge progress in such a short time. Like I said, all the achievement that Israel had, it's from passion, of course, and of course from a support from all of the Jewish people all around the world that support Israel. I would like to, before the questions, I would like to end and say that Israel is really close to my heart. Israel is my home. Israel is the place that I grew up. Israel is the place that I feel like every time I'm ambassador of this country. So first of all, I want to say thank you to all of you from your support and from your from the way that you know about Israel and you want to learn about Israel and you want to know about Israel. It's important for me, and I'm sure it's important to all the people in Israel, and I'm sure it's important to all the Jews around the world. Also, we need to remember, Israel, it's the place that connecting between all of us. It's the state of Israel or it's the land of Israel. Jews all around the world are looking to Israel, and the farmer from Israel is praying for rain at the same place when the Orthodox from Melbourne prays for rain. So we need to remember, Israel is the one. It's the place that connecting all of us. It's the place that we always can find something we can talk about it. We can share our experience from there, and this is why it's so important for us to know about Israel. So I wanted to say thank you very much for listening to me today. Now I'll open the time for a question. I want to thanks again for sharing the time with me, and let's hear your question.
Yeah, so we've got a few questions ready to go. So I think the first question is, why do you think it's so hard for people to have open discussions about Israel? What makes discussing the topic of Israel so difficult?
So I think that the thing that led to people to like be so hard to discuss about, it's the first of all, the knowledge. They don't know enough about Israel. I think they're not interesting enough about Israel. They look at just for the juicy news that someone talked about, and then they just started to criticize Israel without check the facts. This is the first. The other thing, it's not interesting them. I think, like I said at the beginning, Israel is a small country. It's only 1% of the Middle East. So they said, why we need to check about Israel? Why we need to know something about Israel? When something will pop up in the news, then I will know. And as we know, the news, that the media, they have a big power in how she present the things around the world.
Yeah, definitely. Another question, which I think is an interesting one, is you yourself have been a representative of Israel? I mean, you're with the JNF in Australia now, but at one point you were, a national representative for the water polo team. So I imagine you would have come up against other teams from around the world, and you would have, gone and played the game around the world. So a question we have is, what's it like, representing Israel, and have you ever had difficulties representing Israel when you've been around the world discussing Israel and being a citizen and being a representative?
Okay, good question. So first of all, like you said, I played water polo, so I represented Israel in so many places in international tournaments. Every time when you hear the Israeli anthem before the match, it makes you feel proud. Every time I went to a tournament, I felt, yes, this is my purpose. Yeah, of course, I want to win the game. This is like the main purpose, but with that, I represent Israel, and I want to. Every time we had conversation with the other teams, we always try to show them the good sides of Israel, and that it's not really what it looks like. One time someone asked me, I thought when I meet Israeli, I see him with a knife between his teeth. So it was like a pretty shock, and then I understand people don't really know who we are.
Yeah.
And it's a bit complicated because every time there is a team of Israelis going overseas, so they need to go with the security, and there is a lot of coverage about that. So it's complicated, but I think sometimes it just make you be more proud of what you're doing and what your mission is.
Yeah. Something you mentioned there was about, I guess, the hostility that you can sometimes find when you're acting as a representative of Israel. And I know that a lot of people who be able to talk about Israel confidently can sometimes be worried about the hostility that's going to come at them. How do you go about dealing with that? Or how would you recommend going about dealing with that?
You mean from the other teams or just around at the street?
Just in general as well.
So I'm not sure. But again, I was so proud to represent Israel, and still so proud to represent Israel. So I think you don't need to hide your Israelis, and that's fine if you will talk in Israeli accent, and we like to speak very loud, the Israelis. So that's nice. There was a few times that we saw people looked at us in a strange look, but no, I don't think we should hide it, and I think we need to go with the flag that I have in my background with proud.
Yeah, amazing. I've got a bit of a more technical question. So the question is, from around the year 2000, there's been a steady decline in the percentage of Jews in Israel. Why do you think that this is, given that there's been an increase in Aliyah?
I think what's more what in fact about it's just the number of birth. I think the Jewish communities or the Jewish people have less kids than what they used to at the beginning, and I think it can be a lot of it can become from, I don't know, they wanted to succeed, and they want to work hard, and they want to I don't know, support the family, and they find it when you have a lot of, you have big families, can hurt your sorry about it. It can hurt your life. Like, it's not be comfortable. It'd be very hard to support in a big family.
Yeah. So I think one of the other major things that a lot of people always ask is, do you have to be supportive of Israel's government to effectively discuss Israel? Can you be pro-Israel or pro-Zionism without necessarily agreeing with the government? Questions around that nature, because for a lot of people who do discuss Israel, they kind of get bogged down in the issues of potentially the government. What do you think about that?
So I'm doing what like I said at the end. I think Israel is my place, and I'm trying always to present to the people that I'm a good person and my friends are good persons, and we have so many good aspects in Israel. So we need um, to to follow this, and we need to show the people what the good side of us of the people. Because again, when you know people, when you know they're not we're not the monsters, so people will look differently about you.
Yeah, amazing. Well, that's it for questions. So I think we'll end it there. So on behalf of Zionist Victoria and the whole community, thank you, Eldad, for hosting our first session of talking about Israel. So the next session is going to be narratives of Israeli nationalism. We're going to be hosting that next Tuesday. Same again on Facebook Live at 7:30 p.m. So everyone stay tuned for that, and we'll have a speaker announcement in the next week. So thank you, Eldad.
Thank you very much. Thank you for sharing your time with me.
No worries.
It was lovely to be here and talk with you, and
Awesome.
hope to see you here.
Yeah, definitely.
Somewhere.
Thank you to everyone that tuned in once again. Thank you to all of our generous supporters for making this possible. So yeah, I think we'll call it there. Thank you.
Thanks.